Salam and welcome back to SomaliDispatch.com and to our weekly program Dispatches. My name is Abdul Qadir Hussein Goulet. Somalia elected its 10th president, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, on May 15. His administration would face some old and new issues. This being the President Mohammed's second term, expectations vary. While his last administration had successes in security and other areas, many accused him of enriching his allies, while others say his successor was no better, hence his re-election. Most Somalis will tell you the best way to build back Somalia is through strong institutional reforms and not just repeating failed policies of the past. To determine just what those are, we have with us Faisal Roble, an East African political analyst. He joins us from his home in Los Angeles. So Faisal, welcome to Somali Dispatch once more. I greatly appreciate you joining us to unpack some of these issues. But if you could start us off with your reaction of President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud's re-election on May 15 and moving forward, what that means for Somalia.
Yeah, I think it has been widely covered that this was a peaceful power transfer once again in Somalia. As you know, Somalia had 10 presidents, including Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, who is repeating that title for the second time. Of the 10 presidents in our history as Somalis, we only had one military president who usurped power in 1969. Other than that, from the inception of the country up to today, Somalia has shown a level of electoral process despite all the hardships. That's really in the repository of the Somali people. Now, President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud gets that second chance, and he comes to the office with challenges as well as opportunities. We can go to that, but I think what's very interesting for us is that you have a mature person who had been in that position, who made mistakes, who also did a lot of great things, combined those two aspects of his leadership and presidency. The question is how he's going to move forward. So in a sense, he's not a clean slate paper. He's somebody who has that background, and that background, in my opinion, will greatly help him to move forward.
Right. One of the great things about re-electing a former Somali president is a lot has been said about mistakes made by Somali leaders, and to have one of them finally have an opportunity to go back and correct it takes the 4 years was not enough excuse out of the way per se. But we will unpack some of the issues that Somalia faces currently. But it was also interesting after the election. Some of the former president or the outgoing President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo's supporters' reactions to his defeat. What does that mean for the country? As we both know, Hassan Sheikh has to be a president for everybody. And if the former president's supporters do not participate in that regard, what challenges could arise from that?
Indeed, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud should be a president for the entire Somali nation. He cannot afford to be sectarian, and I don't expect him to be a sectarian. On the other hand, the leaving President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo should lend his hand to the new president. He has a lot of experience. He has been a prime minister, and he is now the latest former president. He knows a lot. And in his goodbye presentation, if you heard, he said there are too many challenges awaiting the new president, which I agree. And I think Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, as a former president, can do service to the nation if he lends his hand. Now, that doesn't mean that he has to agree with everything that President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud would be doing, because he has, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo has vested interest politically to come back, or at least support somebody else in 4 years. That's the nature of politics. But from the point of view of, helping and building back the country, I think former presidents have a way to discipline their followers and give them the right message, and B, to, when needed, help the new president without setting his interest to the new president. And three, I think an area where I believe Hamdulillah Farmacho can help the new president is in the issue of ghetto, where some issues may be there. Farmacho is needed there, his leadership is needed, and I hope he welcomes those challenges.
Right, as we are all aware of, the international communities are a partner in this, and what Somalis view as their main priorities, as opposed to the international communities, differ. How do we achieve for Somalia as well as the international community in President Hassan Sheikh's a term here and moving forward?
Well, the international community is only a helping hand to Somalia. They cannot craft policies for Somalia, nor can they create the vision that Somalia needs. Hassan Sheikh Mohamud comes to the office, in my opinion, and I'm guessing from bits and pieces of information that I've gathered for the last 4 years, sometimes talking to his lieutenants, that he has his vision, and that vision has layers of issues that he will prioritize and sequence them. I think one of his top priorities, which I think again can create a teamwork between him and the international community, is the completion of the draft constitution. Somalia cannot go forward without having a complete constitution so that people can arbiter when they have issues. I think another area where the international community needs to help Somalia, not take the lead, but just be assisting Somalia is in the area of security structure. I think too long, our security has been in the hands of, particularly when it comes to decision making, in the hands of outside international, whether that is AMISOM, IGAD, or even the international community. I expect, Abdul Qadir, hopefully, that Somalia will revisit those issues and put together her own package, her own proposal. And that proposal should be forwarded both to the international community that's at Halane, as well as to the international community and power centers or cities such as DC and other places that the president will soon be visiting. We should not expect, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud's presidency should not expect the world to propose. He should propose, and they should help him to dispose and implement those programs and vision.
Right. Speaking to the priorities, the president recently announced his priorities for the first 100 years in office. They included, as you said, security and political reconciliations being the main focus. What does that tell us about his priorities and where the country is going once again? Because as you know, there's been one step forward, two steps backwards in Somali politics in achieving those items. And are those really what the average Somali, not the political elite, the average Somali who is in, let's say, Bakara market and the burning Banadir market, is that their priority as well?
So there are two versions of priorities, if you will. One issue is the issue of governance. So governance has its own layers and issues that we talked about: reconciliation, security structure, finalization of what he himself called a qabio, or incomplete work program, which stands for constitution and what have you. I think those are key because governance needs a base to sit on in order to go forward. The other thing, which I incidentally, Abdul Qadir, already sent my messages to some of my friends, is in the area of, as you are probably alluding to, the bread and butter issues that the Somalis care. If you don't deliver those, big picture will not work. So the issues that you're alluding to include is cleaning up Bakara from security point of view, as well as from taxation. Who taxes these people? Should they pay to the government or to the government and Al-Shabaab? Schools are in shambles. People need services. Somalis have not seen services for a long time. A nation should have a government that gives services no matter what. It could be small. And I think the reason why we haven't been doing that are of twofold. And I will just be very brief. One is that presidency in Somalia became more of a status to attain than to provide service. People go there to really clench the power, and then after that, just relax. So that needs to be to stop. I think there has to be a vision for Hassan Sheikh Mohamud to say, I want, but I want to implement A, B, C, D. That's number one. I think number two is, bringing governance down to where it matters. As you said, it doesn't matter if you satisfy 2, 3 people who come from the diaspora and another one who is a regional government, activist, and then give them what they want after you win. That will not work. I think the satisfaction is measured as to how you provide services to the 15 million Somalis who has not seen their government, be at the regional level or at the national level. Now that's challenging. That's a mountain, task to really tackle. But as planners in my field say, small is beautiful and small is possible, which means that you do these things incrementally. If you don't reach the smallest hut or village, but they see that you are coming to the village next to them, they can wait to get the service in the next year, whether that's school, water, But if they don't see the entire state all the way to Mogadishu, that nothing is happening, then people lose faith. How does that get achieved, and why we haven't achieved that? Despite all the challenges, we haven't been putting together the best government that we could. And most Somalis know, and most Somalis admit that positions and hiring people became more of a distribution of quota as opposed to distribution based on what individuals and the totality of the cabinet, as well as all the levels of executive government that we established. What can they do for the people? That has never been the question at the center. The question at the center is, how can I satisfy so and so that they don't oppose me? And that will give you a temporary satisfaction so that so and so will be quiet. But 4 years down the line, that those masses will remember that. So I think my advice would have been, ignore the position seeker, attend to what people would remember 4 years from now. Schools will be remembered 4 years from now. Health will be remembered 4 years from now. Reconciliation will be remembered 4 years from now. Completion of the draft constitution that will help arbiter issues will be remembered. So I think you get the picture I'm trying to paint here, that we need to have the stomach to say no to ex-regional president or activist so-and-so who will come to manipulate to ask for positions, and remember what the villages and the community would want and would remember 4 years from today.
In other words, think of your legacy. And politics, as they say, speaking to small steps being the greatest, politics is what's possible. You can have grand scheme of ideas, but if you can't implement them, then that's not a sound political sense. You took the words right out of my mouth in terms of my next question, which is then, who is the best fit person that could help the president achieve those goals in terms of his prime minister? And we know he's mired in and bogged down in picking between picking his prime minister and working on the transition. What would you suggest to the president and to Somalis at large that are listening to you to say, this is the characteristics of the person that we need, not that we want? If you could speak to that, would be great.
Yeah. To my knowledge, first of all, the president hasn't started to attend to any selection of his appointment of his prime minister.
The lobbying has started.
Lobbying has started, but I think those are preliminary lobbyings. People are throwing names, but from what I understand, it's not like the president is there to even call names or anything. So just the 25, 23, 30 names that you have seen are just names people on their own put together or guessed it. But what type of a person? I've seen a lot of people making suggestions, and I'll just throw my suggestions. Some people saying, he has to be educated and this and that. And I think the top attribute that the president needs to use as a criteria for the prime minister is if that person shares the vision that the president has. Now, if the president is interviewing somebody, they will all try to say, yes, we share, because that's part of your interview skills. You tell them, your prospective employer that you share his or her vision. So that's given. All of them will say. But from that, I think the president would also need to add to the issue of who has been out there working with the president to attain the position that he is in order to implement his vision. Because a newcomer to the vision is really not somebody that you think they will implement that vision. That's number two. And I think number three is the track record. See, prime minister is a technocrat. President is the visionary. Prime minister is your doer. There has to be somebody who had practical work experience in the field of implementations of policies and programs, whichever they are, because skills are transferable. It has to be also a prime minister, somebody who really can rally the nation through what they know, how they express, and what they can put to the table, and what team they can bring. A good decision maker not only in projects, but even decision maker in the type of people that he or she is selecting. Because at the end of the day, the prime minister doesn't do your day-to-day job. What he does is he or she assembles a team that will do the job down the line. The prime minister that you are putting together should be somebody capable of organizing that team. I think there are a lot of attributes that you can put down, but the big picture is there. Their education, their personality, their one of the biggest things that the prime minister would be dealing with is how to implement the president's program and vision. Can that person do that? Do they have experience to have taken, whatever? People just say vision, vision, vision. Vision is just a simple statement that comes from, a president or a group of people from where you gather. The question is, how do you really assemble that vision and give it structure and goals and programs and all the way down the line? It's like building a car. So you can have this concept of building a car. The question is, when do you complete that car? How do you complete that car so it can drive? So it's the same way. So I think that need is the crafty men and women. If you don't have people who can craft that vision into policies, programs, and implementable, rules and regulations, it will just be something that will be on the book. So I think the challenge we have been having is that every president who comes has some sort of vision. I think we haven't matched the vision with the right craftsmen and women who can do it. And I think that's a chance he has to do this time around, and we will see.
Right. Now, internally, we know from previous tenure of Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, what sort of a relationship that can be built by the president with the regional president-elect and the regional leaders could expect it to have. Given the way things went the last tenure, what are some of the pitfalls that the president should this time heed to and come forward with a different way of approaching the relationship that he builds with the regional leaders and autonomous regions in Somalia?
Very good question. I think there should never be any hint of the president trying to play politics with regional leaders in terms of changing them and installing his own people. You remember some of the worst fights on the ground took place because the federal sitting president, i.e. the leaving president, wanted to change the sitting ones in the regions. I think it happened to certain very small extent also during his first term, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. But I think his challenge was a disagreement between him and the leaders who are trying to formulate Jubaland. Other than that, I think take your hand is off as to who becomes president or leaders of those regions. Because as you said, they're autonomous, they have their own system, they have their own parliament. Let the people in that region elect and then work with them. Whoever they elect, the beauty about federalism is you may not have the same person or the person that you want coming from the regions, but there is a bond tying the two of you. and that bond makes the two of them work together. The Fed is the mother, it controls the purse of the economy and many other things. The region will not really jump quickly on trying to fight the federal government. It's the other way most of the time, and he needs to watch out for that.
Right. As to these regions, Somaliland, as you know, declared its independence in 1991 and has this week celebrated its 31st anniversary. The leaders of that region, the president and the opposition party leaders, have all congratulated the newly elected president, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. What could we look forward in terms of talks between Somalia and Somaliland? And even outside of that, cooperations and security and movement of people?
I think it's a tough question, as you know. I'm not one of those people who think that this issue can be resolved in a very quick way. I used to write a lot on this issue, but knowing how deep the issue is, it's not something that we have to jump on quickly. I think Hassan has the advantage over Farmajo in the sense that the establishment in Hargeisa seem to have more trust in him than they had in Farmajo. I don't know where that comes from, wherever it comes from. That's something that we can all cash.
Yeah. I think it comes from the relationship they had with Farmajo, because they had their differences with Hassan Sheikh in his first term, if you will. But then, when the outgoing president came in, the relationship soured and deteriorated so bad that Hassan Sheikh looks like someone they could work with.
And I think he was a bit lenient in some ways. For instance, when he was formulating the compact, he allowed Somaliland to have its share and its role. And he was even willing to accept that it can receive some of the program aids in a less restrictive than what the presidency of Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo wanted. Whatever the soft spot exists, it's a potential opportunity to be exploited on both sides. The only problem, all the way from the Sharif Ahmed days to Hassan to Farmajo, the talks have been more of an event than a sustained program. I think they need to sit down, especially Hassan Sheikh Mohamud and his team, and see what kind of modalities they can come up with in terms of initiating talks. And when I say modalities, you have to have, like mathematics, a formula to get to where you want in terms of the answer. They need to have a modality, and that modality, or what I call a logic model, which we often use, is to have initiation and outcome. And you have to look at the outcome and see what drivers will take you to that outcome. And you have to build that so that you are moving step by step through the model and structure until you get to the outcome. It could take 3 years, 4 years to even have a meaningful conversation. But so far, it has been more of event. Leaders meeting, and without having the modality, the problem has been even the people that you put on the talks are not the right, because any program that you build should have its own stakeholders and players. And from what we have seen all along, the people who were led or made to lead the talks were not really the right chemistry, in my opinion, nor the knowledgeable people.
Right. The constitutions of Somaliland and Somalia prohibit each leader from that side to concede the union or the separation item. How much is that the biggest problem?
Well, those are the issues they will be negotiating and talking about. And those documents we are talking about are the last stage of the talks. They should never surface or come to the forefront in the early days of the talks. They should be forgotten for a while we are engaging in the talks, but the constitution is say on both sides, as well as the constituents on both sides. Both sides have very, very strong constituents that should be suspended while the talks, the modalities of the talks are being built and the talks are going on. They should be sitting on the back burner. those, in my opinion, should never be addressed right away. It should wait, and that would have its own right time when other issues are addressed.
Thank you, Faisal.